in the door. I was having
Oh, that's Paul. Oh, that's this guy.
Oh, that's it.
Thank you. I'll just further away. So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My mother would be thrilled to see such a full house of people. We really appreciate it, and I know she appreciated all of you. She loved everybody who's in this room, so thank you for being here. So, I'm going to start with some opening comments, and then I'll turn it over to anybody in the family, not in the family, anybody who wants to make any comments, you'll be welcome to come up and make your comments. But in order to honor my mother, I have to sort of start with a friends, Kansans, countrymen. I come not to bury Natalie, but to praise her, right? And I felt compelled to start that way because anybody who knows my mother knows what a great reader she was and how the literary reference that comes from Shakespeare and compares her to Caesar would please her greatly. So, all right, so this is going to be a remembrance for her. That's really what we're here for. So I just want to talk a little bit about her life and her legacy. I would advise any of you who are in the market who have any money in Revlon to sell. Because they're going to start losing money soon. So, you know, Liv and I had the great privilege over the past 19 years to really get to know my mother in a way that I don't think most people know their parents. I mean, we would have coffee with her in the morning, we would visit with her in the evening, and so I know her in a way I did not know her before she moved in with us. My mother grew up very poor. She, one of the reasons that she really loved clothes is that she spent her entire childhood with a thrift store or secondhand clothes. She told me once that the reason she fell in love with my father is he bought her the first coat she ever owned. And it was a beautiful winter coat, and she'd never had anything like that before. And she was bounced around in her childhood. Her father, who she loved very much, died when she was a teenager, and her mother was really focused on taking care of her sister. And so for about 3 years, she lived with relatives in Cleveland, where, as a consequence, she wouldn't even fly through Cleveland. Okay, I mean, she had it in for Cleveland because of the 3 years that she spent there. And she loved her father, who was a profound influence on my father, who taught my father about opera and reading and things like that. And really, in a lot of ways, my grandfather, who I never knew, had a great influence on me through my mother and her memory of him. Her first passion was really nursing. Above anything, I mean, family and nursing, that was it. So I was telling people earlier that one of my first memories as a child is walking with my mother through ShopRite. ShopRite was the New York version of Price Chopper or Piggly Wiggly or whatever. ShopRite was the local grocery store. And I don't know how old I was. I was probably 8, something like that. I was little. And we're walking along, and my mother stops some guy that she doesn't know. I don't know. Neither of us know. And she starts to lecture him about how he's going to die if he doesn't get to a doctor right away, because he has all these signs of imminent heart failure that she can read on his face. And I remember being just incredibly embarrassed. This is not a behavior that ever stopped, by the way. She would regularly counsel people on their medical condition, what they needed to do about it. But I'm sure that she saved some people's lives, and she certainly helped other people through it, even if her approach was, shall we say, direct. So as a 50s, 60s, 70s life, she suffered the normal slings and arrows of fortune and misfortune, another literary reference. My father's business was very cyclical, and I remember there were days when we ate steak, and there were days when we went with nothing but potatoes and pasta. And my mother kept all of that from us. I mean, we grew up really not knowing it. I realized it later, but not at the time. And when she had to go back to work, she went back to work. She just made things happen that needed to happen. Let me see, what else was I going to say? I didn't over-rehearse this because I knew I couldn't. I just had to get through it once. So she was an avid reader, but she was very discerning and critical. I would say that our biggest challenge, one of my biggest challenge, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, when she was less mobile, was finding things that she would watch on TV that were worth her time. Finding her things to read that were worth her time. As a child, I was not allowed to read the Hardy Boys at home, because if I wanted to read an adventure story, I should read Robert Louis Stevenson, right? That was an adventure story, but it would help me on my SATs. And she was right about both of those things, right? To give you some sense of how sharp her mind was, who she was, in the last 4 months of her life, she couldn't get out of her apartment. And she couldn't pay attention with the books. So she would send Liv and I out to go buy her magazines. She'd say, I can read a magazine. So we try to we go to Barnes and Noble. I mean, it's hard to find magazines anymore, right? We go to Barnes and Noble, and we get a variety of magazines. Some were about archaeology, some were about this, some were about that. But she and my dad were always big fans of William F. Buckley. They watched his show on TV. He was a New Yorker. They loved him. And so there was a magazine on the stand that was a 100th year anniversary of Buckley's birth that was published by National Review. And it was just, a whole set of articles, either written by Buckley or about Buckley or whatever. So we brought her back that magazine. And so a couple days later, she manages to get up. She's groaning, she's in pain, she's tired. She gets the walker. She comes out to the table. I fixed coffee for her. I fixed her piece of bread and toast. She's sitting there. Her head is in her hands. She's just exhausted. She's tired. So she looks up at me and she says, "Tell me more about supply side economics." and that's who she was to the end, right? I mean, she was tired. But she was still fully engaged. She was fully present, and she was always that person. She'll be greatly missed by all who knew her. Many of you have already contributed to various things for her. If you are so moved, she's asked that any donations be made to the West Point Jewish Chapel Fund, where my name is there and Ken's name is there, and she was thrilled about both those things. So before we close, we're not going to close this moment, but I want to give everybody else an opportunity to speak who would like to speak. Leslie, I know you want to. Why don't you take it, and then you can pass it on to whoever's next. I think Ronnie wants to say a couple of comments, and I don't know who else. So with that, I hand it over to Leslie, who is fortified by Leslie cake, by the way.
Yeah, Leslie cake. She made Leslie cake, which is really a sour cream cake with chocolate chips, because I wouldn't drink milk when I was little. So that was the way to get me to drink milk. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. And in fact, yes, she did save many lives. I have a story about that too, in that couple stories where I remember she went to the post office, and the man who worked at the post office, she said to him, "You need to go to the emergency room now." And he did. and later thanked her. She really saved his life. I don't remember what was wrong with him. And another time when she was working at the Bear Mountain Toll Booth, the historic center, a man literally crawled onto the step outside of that center, of that little store they made at the old toll booth there, with an anaphylactic reaction. He'd been hiking and he was stung by lots of bees. And, she gave him first aid, called 911, and, took care of him and saved his life, and just a couple of examples in addition to what Steve said, in addition, to all of the people that she really helped outside of her professional work as a nurse. But as Kevin keeps reminding me, this is really a celebration of my mother's life, so I'll tell you a little bit about our relationship, which was very, very close. I became a nurse because of her, and tried to model myself in her approach to motherhood as well. She really encouraged me in everything I did or hoped to do. For example, I wrote terrible poetry when I was a kid, so an example of that is, oh man, would you like to sleep with a can? And she told me it was wonderful, that I could be a poet someday. So always supported me. She encouraged me to follow in Steve's footsteps to West Point. While I wasn't cut out to be an Army officer, I learned a lot about myself when I went to the West Point Prep School. Among the things I learned was that I'd make a better nurse. So that was a good thing. I think she and my dad were a little dismayed when I decided to get married at 19 originally, but they made a beautiful wedding that happened in our backyard. Well, the West Point Chapel, and then reception in the backyard in Croton, and that relationship produced 4 beautiful children who were here with my grandchildren and my mother's great-grandchildren, all of whom she was very devoted to. And I know she talked about missing, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren growing up and seeing what they were all going to do, and Jeff's children, of course, as well as my children's kids. So when I went to graduate school, and I was in graduate school for a while, she at one point told me, we really didn't think you were that smart. Okay, thanks. But she encouraged me in my ambition, but I think she was ahead of her time in terms of work-life balance. She was always reminding me about that. And she had great ideas. We published several articles together, and they were all because of the ideas that she had. I was astounded once when I was teaching a graduate pathophysiology course, and my students were having trouble with my exams, and she was visiting. So I gave her the exam I planned to give my students. And they had all been failing these exams, and she passed with an 85 without studying and without having been in school for 50 years. She was that good of a nurse. Her diagnostic abilities were considerable, and many of you got the benefit of her expertise, and like Steve said, whether you liked it or not. But she was usually right, and she did save lives, as I said. She and I often baked together, but not too long ago, this is a few years ago, we tried a recipe, and it failed miserably, which was unusual for her. Many of you have had her baked goods, you all know. They're usually very good. So she decided to add a few new things to make a new cookie, and she called them Zaza balls. And we laughed about our weird Zaza balls because they looked terrible, but they tasted great. So she could make anything out of 2 eggs and a lemon. I was always amazed by that. She was ever the mother. So an example is when my mother and Kevin and I went on a weekend visit to Maine, and we came back to our house in Connecticut, and the power had gone out, and it was wintertime, and it was freezing. And I was worried about her because she was in her 80s at the time. And instead of worrying about herself, she just wrapped me in her arms and found blankets and kept me warm and was more concerned about how I felt than how she felt. She never stopped being a mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and friend. I always marveled that she could tell others what to do in a way that made them feel comforted and cared about. And I'm sure many of you felt that way. She and my dad sometimes traveled with Kevin and I, and she always retained the wonder of all things in the world up until the very last days of her life. Like Steve said, in the last few days, there was a day that we all sat downstairs with her and talked about politics, books, travel, and of course family. She always looked her best, as you know. I have friends around the world who do not leave the house without lipstick because of my mother. And Sandy, you're here somewhere. You probably remember hearing her say that.
Yes.
And I only ever knew what was really in fashion because she told me. And if I visited and I wasn't wearing something fashionable, she let me know. That was very important. But as Steve said, she had a tough childhood and tough times that came and went throughout her life. But she always remained optimistic, easygoing, and she had this marvelous sense of humor and appreciation for the absurd. And I think those were the secrets of her long life. So thank you for being part of her life and enriching it, and I hope you'll take a piece of her with you and remember her with love. Thank you, and I'll pass this on to whoever wants to say something.
Hello, I'm Jeff. I'm Natalie's oldest grandkid, and unless any of my cousins want to do this, I'm going to for the grandchildren. I'm going to start with a quick little story. So I'm 15 years old, I think. Mom and Dad are out of town. Grandma and Grandpa are living with us in Virginia, and a police officer knocks on the door because an idiot friend of mine had done something stupid in the neighborhood. It's fine, it's not a very interesting story, but nonetheless, a Fairfax County Sheriff's detective was looking for my friend and wanted to know if I knew what he'd been up to. And only Grandma was there. And we're sitting in the little sunken living room in the house in Springfield, and the cop is like, do you know this kid, Todd? And Grandma, he finishes the whole thing. My only remembrance is Grandma leaning in and saying, "Officer, will he still be able to attend the academy?" And as you can tell by my haircut, I did not attend the academy. But that experience of sitting across from Grandma explaining yourself was, for me at least, the sort of dominant theme of being her grandchild. Seeing our grandparents, especially Grandma after Grandpa passed, was a little bit like going on like Letterman, like you had to have material to entertain the host. And the thing is, she would tell you if she was not satisfied with the quality of the input. If she asked you what book you'd read and she didn't think it was a good book, she would say, "I don't know how you could read that." If she asked you about a film you'd seen and she didn't like it, she would say, "I walked out of that movie." And if you had some professional accomplishment that she thought, perhaps could be better, she would tell you. And I will be candid, there were times as a kid where sometimes it didn't feel like there was a ton of empathy there from Grandma. But as she got older, I saw the empathy come through much more so in the last few years of her life. And I think that is a direct reflection of the experience she had with my mom and dad, with Leslie and Kevin, with all of you here who knew her and loved her in the final years of her life, that it opened up this new experience that I had with my grandmother of empathy and sort of frankly unconditional love, where I was never worried about disappointing her in the final years of her life. I knew whatever I told her, she would be happy and she would be proud. And it was a really, really special experience. And I really think it is because of the life she lived with everyone who is in this room. What I came to understand as I got older is that when we were young and she might be asking, again, for some material and you better not disappoint her, it's not that she was disappointed. It's that she saw in each of us versions of ourselves that we sometimes could not see. For each of us, she really believed in the best version of ourselves. And that is what I will take from her, and I hope that's what my cousins and her great-grandkids, my kids who can't be here to a family commitment on their mom's side of the family in Houston today, but that's what the memories that they'll have, is that she could see in everyone in this room the greatness and the possibility that sometimes we could not even see in ourselves. So thank you all for loving her, and I hope, cousins, that was all okay. If not, one of y'all has to come do it. All right.
Hi, I'm Roddy, and I'm proud to say I'm one of the adopted sons of the Rotkoffs. The Rotkoffs came into my life in the summer of 1983 at Trophy Point. I was 18 and didn't know anybody from the East Coast, and through a mutual friend, the O'Briens, my life changed that day. It was one of those moments where I had come from a solid Christian family, and a Jewish mama was about to take control. All for the good, but I had no idea. When Jenny and I came down on Mother's Day this year, I recalled to Natalie, you know, it's been 42 years since that day at Trophy Point. And through those 42 years, like Jeff had said, she knew and believed in the greatness in all of us. And one thing that she said over and over and over again was, Roddy cruised through West Point. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I worked my butt to get a 275. Natalie, I did not cruise. Yes, you did. End of conversation. And it was one of those things where a Jewish mama basically guides you, molds you in such a way that it's encouraging, critical, but loving at the same time. I'll give you an example. I would go home to California twice a year, Christmas and then the summer. So the in-between long weekends, Thanksgiving, Easter, Passover, were spent on Old Post Road South. I loved it. But always, the critical part of Natalie would come out. You need to drink more milk. I'm having a drink with Ed, and I'm about ready to reach for that second drink. Are you sure you want that second drink? Have some more vegetables. But on the flip side, it would be, would you like a second piece of Leslie cake? Those are all wonderful. Getting back to that first year at West Point, I had two major role models, moms in my life. My own mother in California and Natalie in Croton. And it was tough. It was really tough for me. I would call home in the basement of my barracks to California and say, Mom, to my own mother, I don't think I can make it. It's really tough. They're playing mental games. I just don't think I can do it. And my loving mother would always say, well, come home. It's all right, come home. You can do other pursuits in your life. Then when I would call Natalie, you're not leaving. Her encouragement was incredible. She always would say, take one day at a time. She really believed in me. And over the years, I had a very solid childhood. When my mom passed away a few years ago, I always said that I'm the man I am today because of her. Natalie was different. I needed an adult mother. I needed a mother when I was an adult. And she took over that role as far as wisdom, guidance, and so forth. And so over the years, through Desert Storm, through my pharmaceutical career, through my marriage, through my raising my children, Natalie always had solid feedback, and I'll never forget it. I remember when I was dating Jenny, and Natalie would say, tell me more about this, Jenny. And I would go on, and she goes, oh, sounds real nice. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it to our wedding in California because of Ed's health issues. But she did get to meet her, Jenny, the following year. I'll always remember. She pulled me aside and said, don't let her go. She's a keeper. So I don't say this about a whole lot, but I think in heaven an angel just arrived, and Natalie, God bless you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Scott?
I'm not going to go get it.
I wasn't gonna speak, so I don't have anything prepared, but watching Ronnie go through that kind of inspired me to compress 40 years of history into a few moments that I think maybe are my tribute anyway, personal tribute to Natalie. My name's Scott Pfeiffer. I live in Liberty. My family and I live there. In summer of 1987, mid-July is when I met Ed and Natalie. I was introduced to them through the King family, who's sitting here, great Americans. And Colonel King, class of 1950, happened to be on a library board in Skidmore, Missouri, where my grandmother's good friend was on board with him. I knew I was interested in going to West Point, and she told my grandma about this guy, Colonel King. He's a West Point guy. You need to talk to him. And at that time, I was interested. I knew so little, but I was interested. I had a number, so I called Colonel King, and he's one of those guys that I felt myself stiffening up on the phone as a junior in high school. He just had that presence, even over the phone. I had never met him. And so that never changed, and he helped me through the admissions process. Anyway, when it was formalized and I was accepted, he said, now I'm going to introduce you to my in-laws when you get out there, the Rotkoff family. He said, don't worry about quitting, because when she gets her hooks in you, you're not going anywhere. And truer words were never spoken. I met them on my first break there, and trophy point for you, Roddy. For me, it was MacArthur statue. There'll be a guy out there in a sport coat with a handlebar mustache and a gray-haired lady. And like many cadets, I went out there and I was well cared for, well fed, and in many ways, my soul, just food-wise, it was just a great relationship, and it meant more to me over the course of 40 years than I could ever imagine or begin to pay back. one of my favorite stories of Natalie is I was leaving, so it was graduation day, my family stayed with that Natalie that week, and they took care of everybody, and they, fed them, transportation back and forth, and I was getting ready to leave, so I'd signed out, I was getting ready to leave, I couldn't leave fast enough, I couldn't get out, but I had to go by and say thank you and goodbye to Natalie, and that's the one time in my life, in 4 years, I ever saw Natalie cry. It's a little harder than I thought it would be when I was looking. And so, she broke down, quite certain I did. We said our goodbyes, and in the course of all this, Croton Parade was taking, and it wasn't a small parade, like it was a big parade going by 90 Old Post Road, music and bands and high school bands and all this stuff. And I thought, man, I can't wait to get out of this place, but it looks like I'm going to be here for another half hour or so. Well, Natalie fixed that. She walked right out in the middle of that parade, stopped her, backed me out of the driveway, and it was no problem. So that's my favorite memory. I met them as a small town, rural Northwest Missouri kid, and they tried to make a professional New Yorker of me and a Renaissance man. I'm still a work in progress, but if I could ever pay that forward, and I don't know what that looks like, I would assume it'd be a New York kid coming this way that I could maybe try to teach to be a professional Midwesterner. That's about the best thing I could do. But I bet if I could ever do half for a young person what they've done for me since that summer day, I'd be forever grateful. So. Thank you all.
Greg, you want to say something?
Yes, but I'll say it from here because it's too hard to ask these ladies to get up. Natalie Rotkoff indiscriminately adopted Army officers and cadets. I'm one that was adopted. She adopted me 19 years ago when I was mostly full grown. That did not prevent her from counseling me. We shared something in common. I tell people all the time that my heart's perfectly fine, it just doesn't get any counseling. Neither hers, and so we would compare notes. She decided that the cardiologist taking care of me wasn't nearly as good as the cardiologist taking care of her. So don't argue with Natalie Rotkoff from Brooklyn. I went to see John Alfred Thomas, and I think she maybe saved my life because Thomas discovered finally what was wrong with me. But every time I went to see the cardiologist, I would go through an oral examination and it would return. Oftentimes I failed. You have to have the same problem with her. You never get enough details. The second important memory for me, and by the way, parenthetically, I did not go to West Point. I didn't go to West Point prep school either. And there were two reasons for that. First of all, there were no girls at West Point. And secondly, calculus was taught at West Point. And I don't regret the decision not to go, particularly because of this girl, and also because of the calculus. Chopped liver, and baked goods, and lox. Steve made a comment to me that many chickens' lives have been saved because I'm no longer available to eat chopped liver. But food memories are important memories. We were talking about that earlier today. These were people of the Depression era. And, food was a big thing. Food, clothes. My dad was a clothes hound for the same reason that Natalie was. You learn a lot from people who did without. The other thing that I think I learned from Natalie and Ed, and my parents, is patriotism comes along a spectrum. There are flag wavers at one end and others at the other end of the spectrum that don't wave flags. But patriotism is about caring about your country and the people around it. And Natalie and Ed Rotkoff were patriots, first and foremost. And equally important, more important, they were good human beings. And I feel like it was my honor to know both of them and to benefit from the wise counsel and direct approach of Natalie. There was no subtlety about her advice, and it was always good. I am grateful to have known her. Thank you, Natalie, for everything you did for Dan and me.
Steve, can I say this?
I first met Natalie in 1986 when my husband and I were sent to West Point. My husband was a graduate with Steve, and he went back there to teach chemistry. And I was an Army nurse, so I went back to the hospital. I went to the hospital. And because I guess Natalie somehow found out that we were there. I can't remember how that happened, but she met us there one Sunday at the chapel, the Christian chapel where we went to church, and introduced herself. And I was delighted to meet her. And then later, of course, we were invited to the house in Croton. And what I remembered most was that at the house, that is, she served us appetizers, and one of them was liverwurst. Well, I happen to love liverwurst, and that's one of the delicacies that we used to eat. My husband had never had it, and he wasn't interested in trying it. But that meant there was more liverwurst for me. And it's not something that many people like, but I did. And then the next time and then we had other times that we got together. But the main times that we got together was when she and Ed moved in with Steve and Libby in Springfield, Virginia. By that time, I had retired and I was only working a couple days a week. And I liked to do things. I didn't want to stay home all the time. So I would call up Natalie and say, you want to go this way? You want to go to these places? So we would gallivant to different places. And I loved it because she was so enthusiastic, always ready to do something different, and just wonderful to be with, and easy to talk to. And she was always comfortable wherever we went. We went on Army Wives things because my husband was still active duty, and I had joined the Army Wives group, and she was game. So she went with us when we went to the Army Wives events, going to museums, going to restaurants, doing different things. She loved it. And we went, my mother came to visit and had planned to go to an event at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. Back in my mother's day, it was a girls' school and a boarding school. And my mother's father was in the Army, and her mother had died when my mother was 12. So she went to boarding school because her father was around the country and around the world doing his Army thing, and he thought it would be better for her if she was in boarding school with a secure place to be. So my mother came back for a reunion, and I asked her if I could invite Natalie. And she said, sure. Natalie had the best time. It was amazing to me to see Natalie just get along with everybody, no matter who they were. And it was just exciting because learning something from her like that, she felt comfortable everywhere. And if she didn't feel comfortable, she would make herself go up to people and talk to them. And that was just one of the main things I remember about Natalie. She loved people. And she would make it her goal to make other people comfortable. And that she did very, very well.
Anybody else?
Can I say something?
You can do it from there, or you can come back.
I will do it from here, and I only have 2 lines, so because I'm sure that Natalie has told our story many times to many of the people here. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, graduated from the same high school the same year, and did not meet until we both found ourselves in the Middle West. Having Natalie in my life here grounded me, and I will miss her forever.
Anybody else?
I'll speak from here. I met Natalie when I was working at Leavenworth Public Library, and she was a volunteer. And shortly thereafter, I retired. Can't remember exactly why, but we started having lunch together. And I now live in Overland Park, so it's a distance from here. We started having our lunches in Leavenworth, and one thing that always amazed me about her was learned that she was diabetic, but the baking she would do. This was for somebody else, and she would never have a taste of it. We started eating at the same place that I hope to go to this evening. We would go to Famous Dave's in the Legends. And I think only one time did we go someplace other than that. But we would go someplace and she would have a brownie for me. Or she had it could have been Leslie cake for all I know. But she was a wonderful baker, and I felt so attached to Natalie. I did not get the critical side of Natalie that some of the rest of you have described. Just the loving side. And when the time came that she could no longer drive, or felt maybe her family suggested that she no longer drive to the Legends, I felt from Southern Overland Park this was just too far for me to come. It made coming to lunch with Leslie a full-time day outing. And so we started conversing by phone. And if she didn't call me, I would call her. And having known her with our lunches together, I don't know how many years it was probably back in the 80s that I met her, something like that. Then on the phone, I could see the woman I was talking to. Her personality came through, even over the phone, and maybe that's what occurred for some of you as well. And as time went on, I realized we could not talk very long because she did not have the strength to talk on the phone. But I will treasure the times that I was with Natalie. And as I was coming in today, I was thinking about my time at Leavenworth Public Library, and there were positives and there were negatives, and I thought, if I hadn't worked there, I never would have met Natalie, and my life would have been horrible for her. So I'm so pleased to be able to speak just a little bit about Natalie today.
Going once, going twice.
Natalie was my mother-in-law, and I don't know her as long as most people here did. I only got to know her a little over 20 years ago. But she was a remarkable person. She and her husband had both. And, although I embarrassedly not only didn't go to West Point, but never was in the Army at all, I never held it again. Greg said, they came from that Depression generation. They were special people. They had been through hardships that people of my generation did not experience. My wife Leslie wrote books about those in recent years, and I've come to appreciate much more how difficult their lives were and how much of a triumph it was that they both became the people that they became, especially Natalie, who I had the opportunity to know longer, her husband. They were I think of them as really sort of New Yorkers, you know, exemplars, you know, Canadians particularly, which I always wished I could master, that I had that sort of forthrightness to offer my opinions as strongly when they were strongly held. But somehow she never was judgmental when it came to me. I mean, it was remarkable. I don't know.
You were perfect.
You know, I've been with her when an unfortunate, you know, restaurant manager came up and said, well, how was the meal? Well, I won't go on what he said. But, you know, it was really great to know her. And she was always very special to me in the little brief time that I knew her. I guess it's a longer time, but as I say, I could do no wrong. I could remember her famous, you know, Thanksgiving gravy recipe always had mushrooms in it. She knew that I did not like mushrooms, so she made it when she was visiting us on Thanksgiving, and there were grapes in it, because you have to have something in gravy. And so just to accommodate me, you know, in a way, I only wish that I had an opportunity to know her longer and better, but I do really treasure the time that I did get to know her.
Anyone else? I think I can sum up by saying she was authentically her, right? All the time, which we're not all, we can't all claim that. Leslie, do you want to introduce the Nightingales?
Yeah, so there's this wonderful organization called the Nurse Honor Guard, which I did not know about until our hospice nurse from my mother told us about them. And we invited them. My mother wanted them to come. I only wish she was here to see them because she would appreciate it. And I'd like to invite them to come up now and give tribute to my mother for the nursing background that she had and the nurse that she was.
Natalie Rotkoff was a nurse for over 70 years. She graduated from Brooklyn Jewish Hospital Diploma Program in 1953. Following graduation, she worked in private duty and later worked as a substitute school nurse. Natalie became certified by the ANCC in geriatric nursing. She worked at the VA in Montrose, New York, as the head nurse on the geriatric psychiatric unit. During her time on the East Coast, she also was director of nursing of a nursing home and saw one of the earliest diagnosed cases of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a rare and fatal brain disease. In 2005, Natalie moved to Kansas. She volunteered at St. John Hospital and at the Agency on Aging, where she developed and taught programs directed to older adults. She taught a course about the changes in mobility to interested older adults. She also maintained a monthly practice. called Ask the Nurse at the Agency on Aging. People visited her at the agency to ask health-related questions and get advice. She always maintained her nursing license. Natalie also contributed to peer-reviewed publications with her daughter Leslie on topics related to the older adult. Throughout her career, she assisted family, friends, neighbors, and strangers by providing health care advice, nursing care, and referrals to providers and specialists. She answered the call when anyone was in need. A few years ago, she was honored by the University of Kansas School of Nursing with special recognition for her lifelong service in nursing. She truly embodied nursing ideals and principles and continued to keep current in medicine and healthcare until she died.
A nurse's prayer. If there are any nurses in attendance that would like to stand for the reading of the nurse prayer, please feel free to do so now. Dear Lord, give me strength and wisdom when others need my touch, a soothing word to speak to them. Their hearts yearn for so much. Give me joy and laughter to lift a weary soul. Pour in me compassion to make the broken whole. Give me gentle, healing hands for those placed in my care. A blessing to those who need me. This is a nurse's prayer. Amen. You can sit down.
Nursing is a calling, a lifestyle, a way of life. Nurses here today honor Natalie Rotkoff and her life as a nurse. Natalie is not remembered by her years as a nurse, by the differences she made during those years, by stepping into people's lives, and by special moments. Natalie was there. When a calming, quiet presence was all that was needed, Natalie was there. In the excitement and miracle of birth, or in the mystery and loss of life, Natalie was there. When a silent glance could uplift a patient, a family member, or a friend, Natalie was there. At those times when the unexplainable needed to be explained, Natalie was there. When the situation demanded a swift foot and a sharp mind, Natalie was there. When a gentle touch, a first push, or an encouraging word was needed, Natalie was there. In choosing the best one from a family's thank you box of chocolates, Natalie was there. To witness humanity, its beauty, in good times and bad, without judgment, Natalie was there. To embrace the woes of the world willingly and to offer hope, Natalie was there. And now that it's time to be at the greater one's side, Natalie is there. Natalie, we honor you this day and present you this white rose to symbolize our honor and appreciation for being our calling. Natalie Rotkoff, please report for duty. Natalie Rotkoff, please report for duty. Natalie Rotkoff, please report for duty. Natalie Rotkoff, we officially release you of your nursing duties.
Thank you all. This was better than I possibly could have imagined. Hearing all the great stories, the tribute by the Nightingales was just, I don't know, if any of you don't have tears, get yourself checked out. I guess that's what I would say. So before we close, we're going to close with the traditional mourner's prayer. If anybody does not have a program, would like one, so they can follow along, if you raise your hand, maybe somebody will grab some programs in the back. The traditional Jewish mourner's prayer is called Kaddish. Those of us who are so inclined can either read it as it's transliterated, or those of you who know it can read it together, and then we'll read it together in English to close our remembrance. So if you'll join me, those of you who are so, does anybody need a program? Let's see, there's some. Okay.
In the front.
Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'yamon Dibra Kirute, V'yam Lich Machute, V'chayachom, V'yachom. I'm sorry. V'chay Zorel, B'gava Uzman Kariv Yoru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mavorach V'yolom Maya Yisbarach V'yishtabach V'yirhoman V'yitnaram V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitala V'yitala Shemei Dekudisha B'rechu V'yolom Kol Birucha Zushbechata B'nehemata Damiram B'yoma V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rama Min Shemaya Chaim V'yakol V'Yisrael V'yimru Amen. Osei Shalom V'Namav Nu Yasei Shalom Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'yimru Amen. And we'll read together in English. May the great name of God be exalted and sanctified throughout the world, which He has created according to His will. May His kingship be established in your lifetime and in your days, and in the lifetime of the entire household of Israel, swiftly and in the near future, and say Amen. May His great name be blessed forever and ever, blessed, praised, glorified, exalted, extolled, honored, elevated, and lauded, and be the name of the Holy One. Blessed is He, above and beyond any blessings and hymns, praises and consolidations which are uttered in the world, and say Amen. May there be abundant peace from heaven and life upon us and upon all Israel, and say Amen. He who makes peace in His high holy places, may He bring peace upon us and upon all Israel, and say Amen. Thank you all for attending, and in the spirit of my mother, it's time for cake. So if you will join us, if you can, at our home, 713 Willow Street, and loiter a little bit so we can get there ahead of you and put the cake out, okay? Otherwise, we'll see you there. Thank you so much for attending.
Good, good. Thanks. Hey, Bonnie.
Did you get it all? Oh, you're getting it all. Hey, how's it going?
Yes, exactly. I got all the stuff on
I think about
Excuse me. Hey, Elise.
Okay, Jeff.